I'd like to welcome to the stage our guest speaker, who is an important member of the Desai community, as he has volunteered his expertise and mentorship over 3 cohorts. Pete Giordano is a graduate of the University of Michigan College of Engineering, and he is an operator turned investor. Pete has spent 25 years working at companies like VMware and Accenture, 2 startups, and even founded 2 companies of his own. Today, he resides in the Bay Area. He is the founder of GoStart.io that is focused on helping early stage and Series A companies work out the tough stuff. To talk to us more about community today, please welcome Pete Giordano.
Thanks, Angela. Well, thank you, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. So, community is a lot more than just belonging to something. It's about it's about doing something together that makes belonging matter. And I have a question for everyone here. What makes belonging to the Ann Arbor entrepreneurial ecosystem and community matter to you? I can tell you from my experience, like Angela said, I'm a 25-year alumni, but for 20 years, I did not participate in the ecosystem or with the alumni at all. And it was 5 years ago that I got introduced to the Center for Entrepreneurship through a Bay Area trek in San Francisco. And through that relationship, got introduced to the Desai Accelerator and Tech Arb, and have now mentored 3 of the cohorts and led workshops out in the Bay Area and here as well. And for me, there is a very special flavor of entrepreneurship here in Ann Arbor. It's got that Midwestern flair. And secondly, it's an opportunity for me to give back to a community that gave so much to me at the early start of my career. So this community, as Angela said, is already brimming. We've got world-class assets, and there's abundant potential. But I think in any ecosystem or any endeavor, we want to know one critical question, and that is how to realize that potential. Isn't that the ultimate goal every time? And so when Angela asked me to keynote, which is a great honor, I did something that I often do, and that is to look into a different domain to gain inspiration to solve a problem. And in this case, I looked at growth models for businesses. And I didn't have to look for too far or for too long to find one that I think many of us will recognize, and that is Amazon's growth model. And this is called their flywheel. Has anybody heard about this? You guys familiar? Okay, a few hands there. And as you know, Amazon has had this tremendous growth over the last 20 years. But at the core of it is this flywheel. And if we take a closer look, we see that there's many interdependent parts. And all of these parts are not owned by Amazon, right? They have to rely on different members of the ecosystem. The other thing that happened when I took a step back is this flywheel model actually looks more like a diagram from a biology textbook, right? An ecosystem model, which it truly is. The thing about this model, if you study it, is that Amazon has gone through great pains to focus intensely on the customer experience. So much so that every single activity, every decision that's made is aligned toward that customer experience. So the question is then, well, how on earth do we use a flywheel model to help us understand how to build a virtuous community, help grow and nurture that ecosystem? And so I thought I'd show you a little bit of my kind of brain at work as I tried to model this out. We start with this existing, beautiful, wonderful community and this idea of a customer experience. However, let's call it a community experience instead. And we're going to come back to this multiple times. I promise it won't be that long. We already have these quality startups. You're going to see several of them today. Wonderful. I've had the pleasure of meeting with them as a mentor and watching them hone their companies and their pitches for you today. It's just absolutely wonderful. And with a lot of quality startups, you get investors, you get accelerators, you get more education programs. And it was interesting, as I was preparing for this presentation, I did a little research, and the data shows something very interesting about accelerators, which is the whole reason we're here around Desai Accelerator. So a few things. One, this was really striking to me. Accelerators, when they're founded in a region, catalyze latent entrepreneurs. That sounds like really fancy speak, but it just basically means there's a bunch of people that weren't really considering entrepreneurship, but because the accelerator is there, more pathways are opened up, and it activates them to seek that path, to try it out. I think that's a wonderful thing. In addition, accelerators in region attract new investors. And of course, that means increased increased fundraising for those companies in the accelerator. But here's the catch. It also means increased investment for companies not in the accelerator. It is an overall impact to the community. It's a really wonderful thing. And so as the investors, accelerators, and education come into play around these startups, you get a lot more knowledge, capital, experience, flooding into the system, back into the community experience. And as the community thrives, it churns out way more opportunities. And this is inherent in the fact that you've got more many-to-many connections. And what happens? Those opportunities, the increase in opportunities, attract more entrepreneurs, and the cycle continues. But if we go back to the flywheel model, one of the very important key drivers is this community experience. And as I start to think about how to think about a community experience, right? What community experience do you want to create? There's a question. Angela mentioned this is a great place to start a community. And forgive me for asking, but why is Ann Arbor the best place in the world to start a company? What are the unique assets that you can leverage to build that company to success? Same thing goes for investors. Why is this the best place to invest in a company? And I'm a big fan of, when you ask the question why, you should ask 5 to 7 more times to actually get to the root cause, to really find the lowest level of element there. In another way, what are the remarkable aspects, right? So the big question is, what community experience do you want? And that is a big question, and I do not have the answer. I will tell you that now. But it's something that we in the community need to steward. And I have a few ideas on tools we can use. The first is around values. This is a constant theme with me. I'm very big on values and core values. To me, core values are the fulcrum point of decision making, right? It is your principles. It's the way in which you make hard decisions. Culture is an expression of those values. And in fact, another way to put it is, it's how we treat each other. Remember that interdependent set of actors in the ecosystem. We don't all work in the same organization, so we thrive together or not. Shared experiences. This is such a big deal to me. This is a talk I did when during the last Bay Area Trek. It was on how to leverage shared experiences to build kind of your own set of career advisors, so to speak. But these shared experiences are so critical because it's how the values we have in this community, the culture we have, are expressed. It's what we do together that makes belonging to the community matter. We're going to talk a little bit more about shared experiences in a moment. Back to unique assets. We know we have great companies, accelerators, mentors, investors, businesses, institutions here in this area. But what are the unique assets? Another place where we have to ask why 5 times to get to the core. What is the unfair advantage? Right? So if we start to look at putting all this together, I think there are a few activities that I would endeavor on, and I'm hoping that we can start some of those today. In fact, I have a challenge for you later. The first is onboarding students. I feel very strongly, and again, I am an outsider, but forgive me for this perspective, but I think the students are the renewable resource. This is the lifeblood of the entire community coming in. And so if I take a business hat to this, I want to know, what is their onboarding? It's a term for how do we get people onto the product or onto the service, right? And when you start looking at the onboarding, you start examining every single act they take, every experience they have, every venue, every path. It's so important for us to understand those and to make sure that we're delighting these students, to give them the opportunity to explore entrepreneurship as an option. The next is community discussion. These are all big for me. This is a really big one too. I have had a lot of experience in using public discourse to surface the set of values that we hold dear, the culture we want to experience, the activities we want to hold. You might be thinking about town halls, but it doesn't have to be en masse. This can start just with 2 people. What's important about community discussions is creating a safe place for all of the participants to share their view. I can't overstate that. So however you start this, however we start this, whether it's just 2 people in certain pockets, it's important to give people that forum, that platform to speak, and do it safely without regard to judgment on their ideas. And lastly, back to shared experiences. We already have tons of great events. I mean, here's one today, right? And I ask you, are the events intentional in terms of aligning with the customer experience? How can we make that better, right? Think of the flywheel model for Amazon. Every single decision, every activity is focused on that community experience, the customer experience. What about the activities that we do together, which is where we make the bonds, the relationships? How can we design those and align those? And so, again, I want to remind you all that this is not a blueprint, right? It's not a prescription. It's just simply a way to think about all of the independent actors, and there are so many, in this ecosystem. And I believe that when we align the actors and the incentives according to a community experience that is founded in core values with a great culture, that we build a virtuous ecosystem that grows and empowers the community. So my challenge to everyone here is the 72-hour rule. And this comes from an old boss of mine and mentor, Carl Eschenbach. And he would challenge us all the time. And the challenge to you all is, in the next 3 days, take a bit of inspiration from today, from this talk, from one of the many speakers we have today. Whatever it is, choose, but then act on it within 3 days. Make an impact on something that matters to you. Thank you very much. I'm Pete Giordano. It's been a pleasure and an honor to be here. Thanks.